Just want to take a moment to welcome you all. We seem to be pretty good at underestimating the size of our crowd, so I hope that folks can be comfortable. If people need a chair, you can find a chair. Last time I sat on the side wall over here, it's not that horrible. It's kind of pleasant, actually. So if you want to sit, if you're comfortable standing, of course, that's also definitely an option. For those I haven't met yet, or if you haven't met me, I'm George Proakis. I'm city manager here in Watertown. Is this better? This? Okay. Is there an overall mic volume here? I can hold this very close to my mouth and talk really loud, and that's great, but if there is a little bit more volume on the mic, that would be great. It's turned up all the way. Okay, so can you hear me in the back now? Okay, good. So I'm just going to make sure I'm talking loud enough so everyone can hear me in the back. I'm George. I'm the city manager. It's good to see you all back here again. I want to do a quick hand poll. How many people were here for our opening event? That is most of the crowd that's here tonight. How many people here live in Watertown? Okay. How many people here work in Watertown? All right, quite a few, and quite a few of the same hands. That's good. How many people here own a business in Watertown? Okay, we got quite a few of those as well. All right, so got a lot of folks with a lot of interest in this community and what's going on here. How many people here spend quite a bit of time in Watertown Square? Any of us who work at City Hall can answer yes to that. All right, so it's good to see that we got a lot of folks with a lot of interest specifically in the community, in Watertown, in this particular challenge to address. So this evening, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Magoon, our Assistant City Manager for Community Development and Planning. Steve's going to give us a little bit of background on what we're doing here today, and then I'm going to, and then he will introduce the consultant team that is giving a background today. We hope to see you here again over the course of the next 2 days when you can come, whether it be through some of our topic sessions tomorrow, through tomorrow evening's visit where you can come in and see some of the work in progress, through some more topic sessions Thursday morning. We're going to kind of be working in a closed session Thursday afternoon so we can finish everything up, and then Thursday night we'll have another presentation back here where we'll show some of the outcomes of our process. So I'll turn it over to Steve now, and again, thank you all for coming out. It's great to have a huge crowd here tonight, and look forward to the presentation tonight and hearing your feedback as we go on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George. Again, I'm Steve Magoon. I'm the Assistant City Manager for Community Development and Planning. Thrilled to have you all here tonight. Thank you for coming out. Have a lot of people here that I would want to recognize, but in the interest of time, because we have a lot to talk about, most of the City Council, if not all the City Councils here tonight. Again, I think that's a great indication of how important the city administration thinks this process is. Also, I want to thank a lot of the city staff. I'm not going to name them all, mostly because I'd probably forget somebody and then I'd be in big trouble. So we'll just leave it at they're all here and they're doing a great job, done a lot of work putting this together along with our consultant team. Also, I want to take a second to thank the owners of this building. Berkeley Investments, which has been very gracious in allowing us to come in here and invade their space for the kickoff meeting tonight and the next 2 days. I think it's a perfect space, not only because we can occupy it for a few days, but again, I think it's centrally located within the square. It's an unfinished space, which again kind of lends itself to that whole thought process of thinking about things, maybe not as they are today, but how they might someday be. So again, really appreciate them allowing us to use the space. So first thing I'm going to do is just touch a little bit on what we're going to talk about tonight. We'll go through an introduction, talk about some of the goals and elements of the plan process and the timeline. We're going to talk about the public engagement to date and talk about some of the results of some of the things that we've already been doing and already been hearing from the community in terms of the plan and the square. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about a lot of detail on existing conditions, some of the existing information and I think you'll be very impressed with all the data points that the consultant team has put together. A lot of really great and detailed information about the square. We're also going to talk about the Charrette schedule and next steps. Whoops. Skip past one. There we go. So why are we talking about a new plan for Watertown Square? Recently, thanks to the library and Linda Scott, there's been a number of things in the newspaper, some pictures and some writing about the history of Watertown Square and sort of all the iterations it's gone through, both in terms of its physical layout, but also planning efforts for it, and a lot of efforts to talk about what the square could be. So why are we doing it again? What's the kind of the point of this? And these points I think are all really important, talking about creating lively public spaces and safe walking and biking, and supporting small businesses, open spaces, celebrating the Charles River and providing access to it, creating housing options for everyone, incorporating public art, celebrating historic structures, and talking about it as a destination. And I want to focus on that last one a little bit, because I think one of the things that's different about this effort than some of the previous efforts is the previous efforts tended to focus on a particular item, maybe the traffic issue or maybe a design issue. And I think one of the things that we've really tasked the consultant team with is to really look at some of the trade-offs. If we want to make Watertown Square a destination, a place that people want to come to and spend some time at, what are the things that we need to do to make that happen? And what are some of the trade-offs that might be associated with that? So, for example, a lot of times we'll talk about an intersection and trying to maintain road capacity. And there's certain things you can't do because you might degrade road capacity. But it's a different question if you think about, well, if we want to accomplish this and it has this impact on road capacity and maybe it affects it a little bit, is that worth it? Is that a trade-off we're willing to make in order to accomplish that? And I think there's a whole host of those kinds of trade-offs and design options that we need to look at and we'll consider through this process. And I'm very excited that we have the consultant team put together that I think will really help us go through that process of looking at some of those trade-offs and really thinking about different ways to approach the square and what things might be possible. I also want to talk a little bit about what we heard during the comprehensive plan, a process that we recently wrapped up and obviously involved a lot of public input and did talk an awful lot about the square, that it is a defining feature of the community. It's something people identify with Watertown. Obviously, it's Watertown Square. And also that people really felt like we needed to do some planning for the square, that it isn't, again, a destination that people want to go to. It's something you drive through, or drive slowly through. We want to make it something more than that. And roadways in the square serve a lot of purposes. It can be a barrier to transportation for a lot of people, but it also provides access to businesses and commerce. So it's an important aspect. That already moved forward. Okay. So some of the things we're going to be working on, public engagement, obviously through our kitchen table conversations, some of the other engagements with the Watertown Business Coalition and efforts like this, the Polis survey that we've been doing online. We've gotten a tremendous response to that. So we're getting a lot of public input, and you're going to hear a lot of the results of that tonight, a lot of the details. And obviously, the next 2 days is going to be a very important public input component as well. We're going to talk a lot about urban design and redevelopment scenarios. What are some of the scenarios that would help accomplish some of the things we're talking about? Again, trying to create a sense of place and a destination in the square, both in terms of the public realm as well as the urban realm. That's, what's the streetscape's going to look like? where there are opportunities to do things like provide parking or other forms of infrastructure that help define a place. Streetscape in terms of street trees and benches and the things that make pedestrian experiences more enjoyable. And then obviously transportation and parking is a big part of the conversation, a big part of the concern that a lot of people have about the square, both from a perspective of it being too congested, and also from the perspective of it being not welcoming enough for other forms of transportation, like walking and biking and things like that. And we're going to have a lot of, again, high-level peer review of some of the options that we're going to talk about. I know Jeff Speck has already come up with a number of different options looking at the ways we can handle the transportation in the square. And again, very innovative ideas, and we're going to have an opportunity to really vet those in a much more significant way. And then rezoning, we have an MBTA communities law that we need to comply with. We can look at development from a tiered approach, what density we might feel collectively is appropriate. Again, one of the options with the MBTA communities law is a more concentrated and higher density or a less dense, more spread out version. Those are options that we collectively can look at and consider. And then again, some additional public engagement. In terms of the timeline, here we go. In terms of the timeline, we are now at the design charrette. Obviously, we're here. The next significant public, this is obviously the most significant public participation portion of the process, and now through the spring, once we've completed this process and come up with some conceptual recommendations in the next 2 days, then the consultant team is really going to spend the spring putting that information together, putting in a desired option to create a draft plan. We'll bring that out and then go through later in the spring and early summer into an adoption process, again with the public, going through more public forums, and then a process with the planning board and the city council. The last item we want to talk about, or I wanted to talk about, was the sort of what do we talk about when we're saying the square? What are the boundaries that we're talking about? And this is not a hard and fast boundary. I want you to also realize, to the extent that we're talking about planning and maybe zoning is a little bit more of a hard and fast line, but in terms of the planning process, there are opportunities to go beyond the hard and fast boundaries. But generally speaking, we're looking at an area that goes out Main Street, out to the approximately Lexington Street, down to the south, goes out to Aldrich and all the way down to the Newton line. To the east, we go out to Perkins School on the North Beacon and Arsenal corridors, and then out Mount Auburn Street to Palfrey. So it kind of gives you a sense of the boundaries that we've included, at least as a general guidance of the area that we're looking at in the most detail. And here's some pictures that kind of give you a sense of those perspectives from those 3 points on the map. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our consultant team. I'll let them introduce themselves and begin to talk a little bit about what we found through the public engagement process to date. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Can everybody hear me? Is this loud enough? My name is Tim Love from UTEAL. I'm a member of the consultant team, kind of the orchestra director here. And I wanted to explain what we're going to be reviewing next and why it's important for the Charrette process. Generally, you should understand that there's two streams of information that we're considering now as we start thinking about scenarios for the square. One is the engagement process to date, which is what we're hearing from all of you about what your priorities are, what your concerns are, the challenges. That's half of the things that research that we do before launching into scenarios. The other half is the analysis that we do as technical experts. And so what we're going to do this evening is present back to you what we think we understand about the square. You can tell us if we got that right or not, because we want to be as informed as possible before we start tinkering with design scenarios, if that makes sense. You can think about what we're going to do as a kind of compressed National Geographic article about Watertown Square. You know, maybe not as quite as entertaining, but we'll do our best. So we've got 4 chapters here. Lauren is going to cover engagement. I'm going to come back and talk about some of the urban design issues. John, who is making, oh, there he is going to talk about some of the economic development, the market factors, the mix of businesses in the square. And then Ralph and Aaron are going to talk about transportation and mobility issues. We've kept each of these brief talks to 15 minutes. And I think in the interest of time, let us go through our National Geographic piece, and then we'll do Q&A after. Does that make sense? So that, because invariably, if we didn't talk about it in the piece that Lauren's going to do or I'm going to do, maybe John will talk about it anyway. And then what we're going to ask people to do at the end, and then we're going to make some general comments because we're all going to see it all for the first time, quite frankly. I'll ask Jeff to say a few things and maybe George. And then we'll form a line and people can either make comments or ask us questions, and we'll try to keep that entertaining too. So without further ado, Lauren is going to go through where things stand with the public engagement process. Does that sound good? All right.
Thank you, Tim. I'm just going to go over here. So I think the turnout tonight is pretty indicative of how engaged you all are. How's this? How about now? We're good? Better? Okay, I'm going to try my best to project. I am a little bit more soft-spoken, so we'll see how things go. I was just saying, this is such a great turnout, and I think it's really indicative of how passionate you all are for engaging with the city that you live in. And so it was really exciting for us to go through the preliminary feedback and results that we've been getting from this engagement process, because the passion really comes through. So I'm going to walk you through some preliminary feedback we've been hearing from the kitchen table conversations, and also go through some of the Polis survey results that we've packaged. So the kitchen table conversations took place over a 3-week period. It seems like they were all over Watertown Square, and they were really small group conversations that were focused on trying to engage with you all in a more personal, one-on-one manner. I'm curious how many of you all that are here tonight participated in those conversations. That's amazing. Thank you so much for your feedback. It seems like, we got some pretty good attendance. Over 150 residents were able to attend. And we are really grateful. Watertown Community Conversations did a really great job of facilitating those. And we know that they've been meeting with various different members of the community, including Perkins and the Watertown Business Coalition. So we've heard a couple different things, and we're going to also tease out some themes based on the feedback we've received so far. One thing we know is there's a pretty big sense of community with the Watertown Library. The Greenway along the Charles River is very important to you all. And as cultural diversity is another thing that was something we heard a lot about. Other things that we heard about change that people would like to see in the square. Certainly traffic is a big one, and you're going to keep hearing that a lot tonight. And it's certainly something we're going to speak to over the next couple days with you all. We also heard there needs to be better access to green space and more diverse kinds of it. And we've heard as well that there should be diverse and vibrant businesses that create more of a communal feel, so that the community is more engaged in those spaces. We've also heard various things relating to architectural character of buildings and harkening back to historic charm and spirit for Watertown. So some themes that we've heard throughout the conversations are that whatever we do, there should be a really strong sense of inviting and fostering community in the new plan. That walkability and connectivity should be something that's improved so people feel safer and more comfortable getting about. That we should foreground accessibility and green space so that the square is comfortable for all. And that we should also look to revitalizing building facades throughout the square. So these are just a couple quotes that we've started pulling as we've been synthesizing feedback. I'm not going to read them all, but I think, you know, from them you can get a sense that certainly this is speaking back to some of the themes we talked about, people wanting to preserve character, not having big retail chains in the square, but small businesses, and ways that we can improve them and make them feel more supported. That we want to really achieve more placemaking within the square, so how can we make people feel welcome and want to spend time in the square? And also thinking through public realm improvements, how can we make people feel more comfortable in the square's open spaces? Such ideas as bringing benches, other amenities, food vendors, etc. There are some areas, and you'll see this as a theme as well in the Polis survey, which I'll get to next, where of course people have different matters of opinion. Parking is one of those where certainly people want to have parking that supports local businesses, but I think there's a question of how much maybe parking we actually need in the city. CVS, the lot at least behind the CVS was identified as a space that could be perhaps repurposed for something other than parking. And then related to transit, there were many that felt there should be an improvement and an increase of bus access in the square. And some wondering even, you know, how much bus service we do need in the square relative to car traffic and what that would be relative to throughput. So I'm going to go through a snapshot of the Polis survey next. This was something that was really, we thought was a super successful turnout. Just so you know, we've done this Polis survey in various other municipalities before. We've done it in Newton and in Andover and in Worcester, and the numbers for engagement here were really off the charts. It was really amazing to see how many statements were submitted. You all were submitting more votes per voter on average than any of the other municipalities that we've been engaged with. So that was super amazing. To give everyone a little overview of how Polis works, there are 2 opinion groups that emerged, and this basically means the groups emerge based on how likely you are to vote one way or another. So this graphic with the circle on the right is a little bit of a demonstration to show how those statements related to one another. So the closer the dots are to one another, the more alike those statements were to one another, the more alike the people felt the comments were to one another. So that's how you can see there are certainly areas of convergence and areas of divergence among those statements. And so between the 2 groups that emerged, it was clear Group A is in the minority with 27% in that group versus 73% in Group B. And we'll be walking through what characterizes those opinion groups as we go through. Another thing that I want to talk through is if this is the number of statements that are submitted, it's clear there's a lot of room where actually people are in agreement with one another. So that's something we're going to be talking about. And there are certainly some statements where people have less agreement, and that's okay too. So to give you a little bit of a hint of what that means, I'm going to start from the left. We've got more agreement on this side. So 90% of you all feel that you want to see a diversity of retail, shops, cafes in the square. I think that's pretty fair to say. Within the middle, we've got 49% agreeing that Watertown won't be a destination until it is more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. And then where we have less agreement toward the right is where some people feel easy parking is more important than the walking and biking experience. So to go a little bit into what characterizes these groups, Group A with 261 participants cares more about an easy parking experience. They want to have convenient parking. They don't want to risk getting a park-it ticket when they are going out to eat at night. They want to keep traffic moving, And they're a little worried about denser housing development in the square and what that might do to traffic. Group B, with 712 participants, are not fans of cars. That was something that emerged among the various statements. They think there should be less hardscape for cars and more room for people and trees on sidewalks. They're okay with building dense housing. They think that's going to provide foot traffic that will help support local businesses. And they want to make the square really about people, bikes, and mass transit options. They don't want to foreground traffic as the #1 issue in the study. So of all these things that we've been hearing, we've teased out a few major themes. I'm not going to read all of these, but to give you a hint, the environment was something that we heard a lot about from everyone. I think people really want to be able to have easier access to the Charles River, and they want to be able to have more trees that will promote a greener infrastructure for the city. As far as economic development, we heard by and large, everyone wants to see more diverse businesses in the square, more places they can go to shop that will encourage residents and visitors to actually want to spend time. And they want to see small business infrastructure support. For housing, we've heard a variety of things, but certainly there are a lot of people that feel there should be different kinds of housing and that are okay with more density of housing in the square. People also want to see more family housing options and more senior and affordable housing options. For transportation, people want to see bus connections consolidated so that there can be one efficient transit hub. They want faster, frequent, and more reliable transit. They also want to see protected bike lanes and easy parking and walking. For arts and culture, people want to see more diverse events in the square. We certainly heard a lot about how great the farmers market is, and they also want to be able to spend time in the square after dark, so they want to foster a more vibrant nightlife. And lastly, we certainly heard about the importance of considering everyone in the redesign of the square. Certainly that's something that we're going to be doing so that those with handicaps or disabilities feel comfortable and safe when they are in the square. And the other thing I'll end on before passing to Tim is certainly I think there's room for improving the look and feel of the square, and that extends to the architecture of storefronts as well. So I'm going to pass it to Tim to talk through the urban design.
All right, I've heard that people in the back can't hear because of the blower back there, right? Is this true? So I'll project. Okay, so I'm going to go through this very quickly because we have a lot of stuff in this section because we've been geeking out on the history of Watertown Square and then using GIS, which is a digital mapping tool, to look at all of the factors that might influence what's possible and not when we think about the square. The first thing I have up is we learned that the bridge was moved in 1916 or something. It used to align, oh, this was working before. I'm pointing it the wrong way, maybe? Oh, okay, here we go. The bridge was moved because of emerging traffic issues when the automobile was first invented. And so it was shifted over to align with Mount Auburn Street. And so that's pretty cool. That's the map in the middle. I know it's hard to see from where you're sitting, but we'll distribute the slideshow so you can geek out like us. It's also interesting that even when the bridge had its old alignment, Jeff Speck's grandfather in 1898 proposed a way to make the intersection work better even before the bridge was reconstructed, which is kind of awesome. Where Galen Street still came straight in. 1916, we think? Oh, 16. Excuse me? Oh, the question was 1960, and I said no, 1916. The bridge being realigned. The bridge was realigned in 1916. These are more historical images. What you see is Main Street looking toward the north side, the location of the present CVS when it was a much cuter cityscape, right, with smaller scale buildings, making a more kind of texture along the edge. This is the Delta circa 1935. These early photographs are amazing because the design of it was meant to create that central axis on the island pointing down the river as a kind of classical strategy. And then the parking lots in the rear. It's working now. New battery. We had extra batteries. And then I'm going to take you through some analysis we've done. And this might be a little bit hard to see, but it'll give you a flavor of the things we looked at. And again, we'll post the slideshow if you want to drill into this. This is a diagram showing the age of buildings in the square. Lightest is before 1900, darkest is after 1980. You can see there's a diversity of building ages in the square, and I think that's obvious to you if you look around and start to look. There's very contemporary buildings. There's building from the 1960s, and there's older stuff there too. This is a map showing the land use variety. This is mapping the land use on all of the lots in the square, not the buildings, which is why it's fully colorful. To give you a sense, red is commercial. There's a very few dark orange that's mixed use. And then multifamily is the darker yellow. And then as the yellows get lighter, it's smaller housing types on those sites. So you see a kind of dovetailing of residential and commercial here with multifamily in between that's generally healthy from a use mix standpoint. Another map is parcel size. This is important because developers like the big parcels. They're a little bit shyer about the smaller parcels, so the bigger parcels are the darker ones. They include the MBTA bus yard across the river. We'll be thinking about that site too as part of the Charrette. But that gives you a perspective. But of course, not all these parcels are developable because some of them are public land or have other restrictions on them. This is a diagram that shows the current in-place zoning. I'm not going to go into this in detail right now because we'd be here for an hour, but there's a Watertown Square design overlay district in the middle, which allows for some height and density, but it's all by special permit. So we're going to be drilling into that as part of our kind of rethink of the zoning in the square as a complement to some of the design visioning we're going to be doing. These are constrained lands. They're either land owned by DCR. There are certain easement restrictions. We're just getting a handle on this. I don't have a big takeaway about what this means yet. And then easements, including, very importantly, the Stony Brook supply conduit, which is basically somebody else's drinking water. So that runs along the edges of the parking lots, parallel to Main Street. We're fascinated by that whole zone back there, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't mess with Cambridge's water supply. And then we've been doing some thinking about subsurface conditions and utilities, because if we're going to reorganize some of the streets a little bit, it's very expensive to relocate utilities. So we've also done some research to map sewer lines, stormwater lines, water lines, to understand where those major trunk lines are in the branches, because we're going to be conscious of those when we're making stuff up, so that we don't propose unrealistic things. This is don't be alarmed by this map. The bigger blue is only if the Charles River dam system fails. The actual areas at risk are very small areas right along the Charles River. But I told them to make the larger blue area lighter, but it was too late for them to change it. And then the width of the public right-of-ways where the streets are. This is fascinating because there's more consistency than you would think. And the question is, what's the best design strategy within that public right-of-way? Because beyond the right-of-ways, you're on private land, right? So understanding that hierarchy, what the opportunities are, and having a handle on those dimensions as we enter into the Charrette phase is very important. Again, this is a cavalcade of things we've been looking at. Sidewalk width. It's no surprise that the closer you get to the center of the square, the smaller the sidewalks, because traffic engineers have stolen those sidewalks away for additional travel lanes. And so it's a diagram of inverse logic, where the sidewalks are the skinniest, where maybe you would think they would be the widest because of pedestrian desire lines and pedestrian paths. And the consequences of that is your trees are sick there because the sidewalks are skinny and the trees they don't have the proper structural soil to support healthy tree growth. So one of the takeaways too is we can make the sidewalks wider again. We can increase tree canopy with a healthy amount of structural soil, because dealing with trees as a design strategy is something we're definitely going to focus on as part of the charrette. This is a close-up of narrow sidewalks and sick tree diagram, which is still in the works, but we thought making that correlation was interesting. And then finally, the quality and character of the built form in the square. That historical photograph I showed with the line of buildings along the north side of Main Street, that historic photo has been eroded over decades. And I think one of the things we want to do is think about the street wall as a contributor to the quality of the public space of the streets and square itself. And so where are edges important? Where are they aren't important? Do we want to think about edges along that whole parking zone as an extension of the linear path? It's one of the issues we're thinking about. And then finally, we're fascinated by Saltonstall Park, the linear park, and how it terminates in those parking lots. Is there a better design there that still accommodates convenient parking, but makes that a nicer place back there? So we're going to be focusing on Main and Pleasant and Mount Auburn, but we also want to snoop around back there, partly because the city owns a lot of that land. And so the city can act quicker there than private development. So that's my very quick kind of overview of the things we've been looking at. These are the takeaways. We need to pay attention to what is underground as much as what we see on the surface. This is for the consultant team. Let's not be sloppy about that. The sidewalks are narrowest at the heart of the square, affecting pedestrian safety and comfort, opportunities for activation of the public realm, and the ability to increase the amount of tree canopy. Rectifying this should be a priority. There are a lot of surface parking lots in the study area, but most are hidden behind buildings. Convenient parking needs to be part of the recipe, but should and can be better designed. Why can't parking lots be parking gardens or, I don't know, spaces? The zone of parking lots parallel north of Main Street present a unique design opportunity, partly because many of them are owned by the city. I'm repeating things I've already said. And extending the linear park into this zone and identifying priority pedestrian routes that provide safe, comfortable, and visually engaging connections south to the Charles River should be a focus of the design effort. So that's our urban design mission, okay? So I'm now going to turn it over to John, who's going to talk about the square in a different way. How's that? Is that all right? Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. I'll try to talk loud. My name is John Tremontosi. I'm with Landwise Advisors. We're a small real estate advisory firm here in Watertown. I've been working in and around the square for the last 12 years doing this kind of practice. And so it's a place I spend a lot of time, I care a lot about, and so I'm excited to be here tonight and sharing in this process with everyone. So our role in the team is really to make sure that we bring a market and economic reality to the planning process. So tonight I'm going to share a little bit about some market trends and considerations, things that we're currently seeing on the market that might impact the way we think about the square. I'm going to tell you right off, I'm going to hit you with lots of numbers and maps. You won't be able to see it all or digest it all, but I'll try to kind of call out the salient points as we go through. So right off the bat, here's a map of kind of recent and under construction and permitted development within the study area. And the first thing you'll see is that there's lots of new investment and new development happening in Watertown, right? I think as you walk around, drive around, you see that with your own eyes. It's a place where people want to park their money and make investments. The market wants to be here. It is changing rapidly, so it's, that's the reality of what's happening on the ground. I think the question is, how do we, as a community, and a planning team want to shape that growth and make it sort of work for everybody. I'm going to separate this into residential and commercial here right now. The first thing I want to point out is that this is just the study area. There are, big projects, Arsenal Yards, for example, the Watertown Mall redevelopment that are outside of this particular map purview. We're not leaving that out of the discussion. We're well aware of what's happening and the numbers, but for tonight, I'm just showing the study area, if you will. So on the residential side, the orange projects here are things that are recently completed. We go back to about 2016 on this slide. And then the blue are things that are either under construction or in the development pipeline that have been approved. So on the residential side, most of the new things that have come in are not immediately in the heart of the square, and they're mostly rental projects. There's one for sale condo project, which is 101 North Beacon over here. The rest are all rental. One thing I think is worth noting is that the two most recently approved projects here in the blue are right on Main Street, very close to the core. They're also smaller sites. So as Tim was saying, typically the larger sites are going to be the ones the developers go to first, but seeing some kind of smaller infill development is, I think, interesting and notable, and hopefully a good trend. This is just a tabular list of those same projects, just to give you some of the data about when they were built, how many units. Obviously, all of these have preserved affordable units as part of the development plan as well. And I think the important thing is when we think about what's happened since 2016, about 1,100 or more units have been added or in the pipeline within the study area alone. So it's a pretty large number of housing units, and I think we would expect that to continue. So just real quick, thinking about pricing, I know affordability is something that's top of mind. You can't really get online or pick up a newspaper without hearing about affordability and the housing crunch in Greater Boston, and Watertown is not immune to that, as you know. So basically, what this is recently developed rental projects. They're sort of rent and square footage charted on a scatter plot. So if you look at, for example, these sort of orange dots or the brightly colored ones here, these are just individual units and their pricing. And so what you see is that if you want a unit, let's say more than 1,000 square feet on this side of the chart, you're somewhere up in the $4,000 and $5,000 per month range for new construction product, right? So that's obviously pricey for many folks, but that's what is required to make those projects financially feasible. The light blue dots here that are sort of scattered about are the existing rentals. Those are things that are not new. They've been around for a while. And so what you'll see is, of course, the size range is much bigger. You see units that are above 1,500 square feet, for example, and still relatively affordable compared to the new product. So just getting a sense for sort of how the existing and the new compare on pricing, and that's something that we'll look at for retail and ground level kind of small office spaces as well. Same thing on for sale product. This one's pretty easy to see. There's one new project, as I mentioned, 101 North Beacon, and what you see here is that to get a 2-bedroom unit, it's $800,000 to $1 million for a unit like that, new construction, right? The rest of the dots are things that have been built at different times, and you can see they're much more spread out. Obviously the age varies, the quality varies. So, you can get into that market for, more in the kind of, let's call it $500 a square foot range, if anybody thinks that's affordable. But, you see that there's a pretty big differential there. So, but that's what's happening in the market. And so it's just something that we're going to have to address head on in this plan. Obviously, adding affordable units with the new project helps, but there's obviously a wider range of strategies that I'm not going to be able to unpack them all tonight, but affordable housing is a top concern. This is just a summary of the rental market. I won't read all the bullet points here, but the bottom line is, rents are up, I think 20% over last year. Watertown is about 20% below places like Somerville and Cambridge, but it's still quite expensive as we just looked. Supply is very, very tight. It's come off, the all-time highs, but it's still super tight. There's not enough new construction happening to bring that price level down. And so the expectation is that housing will remain tight in Greater Boston and in Watertown, and that pricing is likely to continue to rise. On the commercial side, we're going to show here essentially 5 projects within the study area that are under construction. Some of them are nearing completion now. You've got almost 1 million square feet of new construction, mostly lab and R&D style development. I think there's lots to think about with that kind of development. One of the projects is the building we're in right now. This one is actually a conversion. It was formerly an office building, now R&D. But all of these buildings will bring, theoretically, once they're occupied, lots of folks within walking distance of the square, right? So if you add up all this space and you apply some sort of reasonable metric of square feet per employee, we're talking about thousands of employees that could be within walking distance of the square. That brings all kinds of things, but one thing it will help is the downtown sort of retail restaurant type of users, right? Lots of disposable income, lots of people that need to go out and have lunch or get groceries to bring home in the evening, whatever it might be. You're going to see more people walking around the street in the square in the next few years. So I think in a lot of ways that's a good thing and will enable us to do hopefully some of the things that we'd like to accomplish with this plan. Same thing, just looking at it in a tabular form in terms of the scale of some of the projects. You're not going to be able to see that, but it's about 1 million square feet of new space soon to be occupied. So I just wanted to put that also in context of the whole lab market in Boston. Boston is the preeminent lab market in the country. Watertown is part of that. It has been growing rapidly, but you're probably not surprised to know that there's been a lot of building in all of the lab markets in Boston. Right now, about almost 16 million square feet of new space that's under construction. And so, it's going to take some time to fill up all that space. I think we're already seeing signs of that softening a bit, right? You've got vacancy rates up a tick. You've got rents that are coming down a little bit, or at least softening. And so I think for the foreseeable future, we should expect to see that same trend. So all that to say, people will be in these buildings, but I don't know how fast they're gonna lease up. So if anyone knows, feel free to raise your hand. But I think it is a softening market. Just a little bit here. We have a lot more data that we're going to share on Thursday in the Destination Square breakout group. So that's just a little plug for that session Thursday morning. We're going to talk a lot about street level retail, restaurant, small businesses. But this is just a smattering of some available spaces that are currently for lease. This is not everything. It's just a sampling. But essentially what we see is that existing buildings can be had for somewhere between $20 and $25 on average per square foot. In the newer projects, when you have street level kind of retail or small business spaces, they're typically going to be $40 or more, right? So there's a pretty big divergence between existing and new space. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Some of those existing spaces being more affordable can allow a wider range of businesses to occupy them, maybe some creative concepts. The more expensive space is more likely going to go, not necessarily to just national chains, but to types of retailers who can afford those higher rents. And having that full range of kind of retail and restaurant type of experiences is not necessarily a bad thing, but we certainly want to try to preserve some of the affordable space. The square is the most authentic kind of walkable shopping area within Watertown, and certainly I think most people here probably want to see it remain that way. So authenticity is key. So real quickly, just a series of maps of current employment, and I'll just orient you. The sort of black line is the city line. I don't know why this thing isn't working. And then the purple line is the study area. And so the dots on this map are going to be clusters of employment. The smaller the dot, the smaller the number of employees. So the smallest dots here are 5 to 20, and the largest are 2,000 plus. And so I'm just going to go through these. They're organized by different industries. So this first one is education, right? So Boston being a big eds and meds economy. Interestingly, there's not a whole lot of that within the study area. You see a couple big dots. I think it's Perkins and probably the high school that are just outside of the study area. But really, education is not what's driving employment inside the zone. Now, if we flip to healthcare, you see a lot more of a clustering of, let's call it medium-sized employment within the study area. Expect those dots to continue to expand and to see more of those dots in the coming years as some of those lab spaces fill up, and you see other kind of medium-sized and small employers want to locate around those new businesses. For professional services, you also see a decent sort of clustering close to the square. You've got information, finance, and then professional services. So whether it's accounting firms, banks, things like that, consulting, a decent number of those are clustered here. You can also see that they're spread out all around this map, so it's not unique to the square. Retail trade, this is kind of, think of it more like big box retail, like CVS, Target, those kind of things. Again, most of that's going to happen on the main thoroughfares, out Arsenal, North Beacon, that kind of thing, but a little bit of it happening within the square. And then finally, food services. I think this one's important, right? So for this kind of walkable, kind of dense retail environment, you would expect to see lots of food of all sorts, fast casual, sit down. And in fact, in recent years, we're seeing that restaurants are taking an increasingly larger share of those kind of retail districts. As much as 50% or more can be restaurants in these kind of zones. That's the trend that we're seeing. And so you do see a clustering here. There's certainly a lot of restaurants in and around the square. Interestingly, if you look outside of the square, they're pretty much everywhere. There's lots of food services all over Watertown. So if you're hungry and you need a place to go, you can go pretty much anywhere in Watertown. But I think the idea is that over time, as more of those buildings fill up with employees and daytime workers, more residential gets built within walking distance, you should expect to see more and more of these businesses locating within the square. I think there's already a lot, but there likely can be more. So just to summarize that, so you've got concentrations in medical office and lab, food services, finance, information, and professional services. Those are the daytime employees that are currently here. That number will continue to grow, and they'll continue to support retail and food services within the square. Again, food is not the only, it's spread out across the city. I found that to be actually somewhat interesting. I thought it would be more clustered in the square, so I think there's more opportunity there. So just overall takeaways, and then I'll pass it on. So lots of investment happening within the square. Again, just within the study area alone, 1,100 new units and about 1 million square feet of lab space over the last, let's call it 5 to 7 years. All of that new development will lead to additional people, additional expenditures, and additional activity within the square. Affordability is still top of mind. Watertown's more affordable than some other submarkets in Boston, but increasingly folks of low to middle income are getting priced out of the market. Occupancy of small commercial spaces today is fairly healthy. I did another walk around the square today just to look at all the vacant spaces. Certainly there are available spaces, but in general it looks fairly healthy. And so I think the bigger question is, can some of these spaces benefit from additional investment or newer, fresher kind of retail concepts? And then finally, I think the square enjoys a dense and growing cluster of employment of both small and large businesses. And importantly, the new employment that's coming in is within a walking distance of the square. And I think, again, that brings opportunity for things like better walking paths, better bike paths, better retail, and programming within the square. So hopefully it's mostly a positive. I know there's challenges and things that need to be mitigated with new development, but that's something that we can all be talking about throughout this plan. So thanks for listening, and I'm going to pass it on to Ralph and Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Can everybody hear me? All right. No, I hear no. People are shaking their heads. How about now? All right. My name's Ralph Danisco. I'm here with Aaron Cameron. We're with Stantec. We like to call ourselves integrated mobility planners, which means we work and understand all the various aspects of a mobility system. How roadways work, parking, transit, pedestrian, and bicycle networks. More importantly, we work in places where those things have to fit together in complicated environments like Watertown Square, even better in service of the kinds of things we're actually trying to achieve in that place, which is, I think, what you heard through the rest of the presentation today. So our job here is to just walk you through some of the transportation conditions and some of the demand. This is still a highlight. We have much more information behind this. We've had to prepare it to undergird the kind of work that we're going to be doing over the next few days. So we're just trying to show you some takeaways from some of the data across the different modes, and just understand that this is all part of the work that we need to do, because in Watertown, you experience it differently depending on who you are, whether you work here, whether you shop here, whether you live here, whether you're a delivery driver, whatever the different thing happens to be. And many of you are all of those things on any given day or any given week. And when you're walking or biking or any of those things, you're frustrated or pleased by certain things. So we're trying to capture all of those various impacts. And Watertown Square is sort of centrally located and at the crossroads of many different things. We have some data that we're going to show you a little bit later in this presentation, where we talk about kind of where some of those folks are coming from and where they're going as they drive through the square. But it's also a very both local and regional serving destination. I think as John was showing, those employees, those customers, all those folks are coming from near and far. And we have to think about all the interconnected networks that serve them, right? So Watertown Square, and this is the same study area that you've seen, and we've got some information. We'll show you the various multimodal networks. But it is the nexus of a pedestrian network, a bicycle network, a trail network, a transit network, a roadway network, and all of those things intersect and have different fingers that go out, at various lengths in and around the square, in and around Watertown, into Newton, over to the Mass Pike, and to other places. So we're really trying to document and understand kind of all of those things. These are just a few of the comments that folks had about Watertown Square and the Watertown Comprehensive Plan, which was recently completed. And you clearly don't care about just one thing. You care about all these things just from a mobility standpoint. And we tried to highlight a few of them here. And I think what's really interesting is seeing these statements reflected again and maybe prioritized a little bit in the kitchen table conversations and in the Polis survey, where you can see sort of agreement largely with many of these statements. And, I think why we're here today, number one with the bullet recommendation of the comp plan was to do something about Watertown Square. And again, that's why we're here. So just, again, that multimodal network and understanding where all those pieces fit together, those crosswalks. I think, Tim, you did a very good job of saying some of the challenges where those sidewalks get narrower in the places you need them the most. And how that feels, because even though this is a place that comes together, it does not feel like a place that fits together, right? There's many times where you're not comfortable as a pedestrian, as a driver, as a bicyclist in all parts of the square. You might be comfortable in individual components of it, but you hit those barriers pretty quickly, and they prevent you from going across the street, down the block, to that other store, to that other restaurant. It makes you want to park over here and not over there. We know we're going to have to talk about traffic. We have much data. We did this half for our own sake, and I think it's a really good exposition. This is just the way that the signal phase works today at the main square. And by the way, we're not just looking at Watertown Square. We're going to be looking at the entire study area. All the other roads are interconnected with this square, but this is the main path where all these roads come together. You can see just those green arrows, and each phase is who gets a green and when and who can go with others. There's a pedestrian level that goes with this. What I want to point out, and Aaron was able to pull these numbers for us, the average delay, right? And I don't want to talk a lot about delay, right? But the point I want to make is you're already experiencing traffic delay in Watertown Square, and you're getting none of the benefits of the improved streetscape or potential or environment that you would normally get by squeezing the roadway down, right? So we need to understand what it is now so we can understand what those trade-offs are. I think as Steve said earlier, when we start to think about what else is possible here. So we have all this information. We're going to keep using it so we can understand what those pieces are. And part of that delay means and those wider roadways means you have long crosswalks. You just have to cross 4, 5, 6 lanes to get from one side of the street to the other. And you may have to wait through a long signal cycle in order to be able to do that, right? We have to think about how you are experiencing the street, and Jeff's going to talk a lot about this, right? How what is interesting for you, what what you might want to be able to do or why you don't go to certain places. And some of it is just because of the way the infrastructure is shown. You see here just the length of some of those crosswalks, you know, and the multiple if you're going from one side to the other side that you have to cross here. You've seen this before, the sidewalk inventory and the width of each of those sidewalks. We have all that. We know what's underneath those sidewalks and underneath the street, as Tim showed. The pedestrian and bicycle plan, it was recently adopted here. You've been building out your bicycle network. You have recommendations for pedestrian improvements. We know those. We want to build upon them. It's a priority location, of course. It's also a high crash location. So tell me exactly what I'm supposed to say about that.
Thanks, Ralph. So, can everyone hear me? Okay, so Watertown Square, when we looked at the pedestrian plan that you all did in 2021, is the location of, 5 of the 6 largest corridors for crashes for pedestrians and cyclists. That's a problem if we want to add all of the additional retail and additional housing to make it a safer environment for pedestrians and cyclists. So we just wanted to note that here tonight because you already did the work and we want to acknowledge that. This next slide is showing the bicycle facilities and what's planned. So you can see that in the middle of Watertown Square, those colored lines stop. You do have a dotted blue line. Ralph, can you show it on the pointer? Which is, on the next slide, you'll see that there's a recommendation to actually extend the Arsenal Street cycle path. And that's important because the facilities and the experience for a cyclist today in Watertown Square is one of a high traffic stress. So it's uncomfortable for a cyclist, which means that folks might not be biking here as much as they may want to. This is just an image of what exists on Arsenal Street today and what would be extended into Watertown Square. Sure. The next section of this is just to talk about some of the transit. So similar, like we had the map that showed where downtown Boston was for all of you, we're showing how you can get there with transit. So we have the Route 57, the 70, the 71 that serve Watertown Square today, which gives you access to get to Kendall Square, that gives you access to get to Harvard Square, and you can get to the commuter rail to get into downtown Boston. This map here is showing the ridership and who's riding on the different routes. The dark orange in the background is actually a 3-minute walk shed, and you can see that it does connect you from the Delta bus hub station to Watertown Yard, so that's a 3-minute walk. But that's a 3-minute walk, and if you're getting off the 57 and you need to transfer to the 70 and you see it, you can't get there in time. So we want to also look at those pedestrian connections to service transit. The bus network redesign that the MBTA released, I believe it was last year, is going to bring additional high-quality service to Watertown Square. The 71, 70, and 57 will have high levels of service and encourage more ridership for the folks in Watertown. Ralph's highlighting it's about 15 minutes or better, and we're actually seeing that that's going to be closer to 6 minutes. So it's going to operate much faster so that you can rely on the bus. So I'm going to keep going. So we have this tool that's called Replica, and it's location-based service data. So all of you have a cell phone in your pocket, and it's tracking you whether you like it or not. But what we use it for is that we can know who's coming to Watertown Square, where are they coming from, and how are they getting here. So you can see the orange lines on the map, and we're looking at if you're approaching Watertown Square from Galen Street, or you're approaching from Mount Auburn Street, what % of folks coming into Watertown Square are on that road? And this allows us to know what those demands are from that street.
You should note that these are daily.
These are daily trips.
It's not just the peak hour, this is kind of all day.
But as Ralph said, we have all of this for AM and PM, and we can get into it if it comes down to it. So the next slide is going to show you that from that analysis, we're able to understand if folks are starting their trip from outside of Watertown or they're starting inside Watertown. Are they leaving Watertown once they pass that line, or are they going somewhere in Watertown or Watertown Square? This map, the purple arrows are leaving Watertown. And this this slide is showing you that trips on North Beacon Street and on Main Street are typically serving Watertown. These are folks that are either originating from here or they're going somewhere here. So we want to make sure that Main Street and North Beacon get just as much attention as some of the regional connection routes on this next slide that are more servicing trips that are going outside of Watertown. So we see that about 1 in every 3 trips through Watertown Square is either coming from or going to the Mass Pike. They're using Mount Auburn Street, they're using Galen Street. This is important information, and we want to consider that because if you were, as Ralph said, you have high levels of delay in the square today, and if you're going to the Pike, what is an extra 20 seconds? So this is just an example. We can dive into this and understand every trip and every street, how it relates to the bigger picture. At the intersection meeting tomorrow morning, we'll have this type of slide for every single road approach. And I'll turn it back to Ralph to talk about parking.
So these are really important because I think they help you understand the bigger picture of what's going on in Watertown Square. Who's there? Where are they coming from? Where are they going? And when we start to think about what if we made this road bend over here or we eliminated that left turn or anything else that we can think of, we have some basis to talk about it without having to do, 80 pages of traffic analysis. We can understand who gets impacted by those things. I think we even we'll have a board that has many of these maps so you can all look at them and get up in them. Parking obviously will be a consideration. The Watertown parking study was done a few years ago. The city adopted many of those recommendations. There's really good inventory of what exists and at least how it was used a few years ago. Those are just some numbers of spaces. A couple of things we really want to point out, though. I like to say all parking's not created equal, right? Every space doesn't have the same value or the same utility. People want to park right up front or where where it is that is close to their destination. And despite all these spaces, what you have here, right at the heart of the square is many of those streets have no on-street parking. There's no curbside use there. There's no way to drop off. And as a result, if you think about how all these pieces tie together, many of those are the more underutilized retail spaces in the square. And that may be a thing that we really want to revisit as we move forward here. And we have the kind of basis to do that. And again, I think you saw this before. You all participated in putting this piece together. And when we think about the opportunities, it's not just how do we narrow the roads, it's how do we strategically accomplish all of the things we're trying to accomplish by not just focusing on how many cars we can get through at any particular time, right? I think that's probably one of the first trade-offs that we can think about and try to understand here. And we've got the basis to sort of do that. So just some of the quick takeaways before I turn it back over, and I think then this is the end of the presentation portion. Again, 1 in 3 trips are going to or coming from the Mass Turnpike. That's all the trips that are entering Watertown Square. It's a pretty high number. And that average delay, and that's in the AM and PM. If you came here at 2 in the afternoon or, at 8 o'clock at night, there's very little delay. But you've got a roadway that's designed to accommodate this and is still accomplishing delay. The crash data, the safety data, both actual crashes and the perception of the safety issues, I think, are really things that we need to attack here. The curbside regulations, aren't doing the retail or the activation of the square any favors. And then this is always going to be an important bus hub. I think we've already talked to the MBTA. I think we're going to want to keep thinking about ways to reinforce that for all of the reasons. Different ways for people to get here, better access for folks who live here. And just better connections between those bus services. And how do we sort of do that? So with that, Tim, do I go back to you? All right. Thank you.
All right, I hope that wasn't too much detail, but I think for those that are going to be following along for the next couple of days, to know what kind of information we have, and we're going to have more of it in our sessions. You understand the kind of the starting point and the content that we're going to be working with. I don't know, is Jeff here? Where's Jeff? Jeff, do you want to make any observations based on what you heard, or are you good? Yeah. But yeah, Jeff, Jeff will ask the first question or make the first comment. You'll get the pattern going here.
That's not what I was going to do. So I'm not in charge. Tim's in charge. And that's good because I like to ask tougher questions, and often I ask unpopular questions, which I would redefine as counterintuitive questions. But I was thinking tonight, if I could define myself in this job, I'm the sand and the oyster that maybe gets you a pearl. I was looking at my phone. So what I wanted to say was that I think we're presenting you, or in the discussion of the roughly 1/4 who are more interested in easy driving and parking, and the 3/4 who are more interested in a walkable, bikeable, livable, more humane square, that you're being presented with a false conflict. There are some issues that we're dealing with that you can say, okay, there's a legitimate conflict. There are people who want more housing in the square, and there are people who want less housing in the square. Like, that's pretty much a legitimate conflict. Although I would ask, not to be discussed tonight, if you don't want more housing in the square, where do you want it in Watertown? Because we're required to have more housing in Watertown. But moving on, I want to show you on my phone. You can't see it. I'll describe it to you. While I was sitting there, I mapped what I do 2 nights a week, which is to take my son from Brookline to diving practice. He's 13 years old at Bentley. And every night we're directed through Watertown Square. We are contributing to that unwanted cut-through traffic of people who have no business being in Watertown, but it's the quickest path, and it's 27 minutes. At the time we take our trip, it's 27 minutes from our home on Beacon Street in Brookline to Bentley. It's 28 minutes if we took Route 9 and 95. So we're in Watertown, okay? This is how traffic works. And Ralph, bless his heart, Ralph's models don't understand this. They're going to study the square, and they're going to say, if you reduce lanes, you're going to have more congestion. But they're not looking systematically. And I just want you all to be thinking systematically. Because the fact is, did adding lanes to Watertown Square get rid of your traffic? Did removing half your sidewalks and most of your trees get rid of your traffic? No, because people look at their maps or their experience living in the city, and they take the quickest path. And nowadays, it's perfectly calibrated because of Waze. So even if you're not looking at Waze, someone else is looking at Waze, and they're making the decision to come through Watertown Square. So if adding lanes to remove congestion didn't solve your congestion, is removing lanes going to make your congestion any worse? You guys study logic? If adding lanes, as you have done, and maybe some people would still like to do, did not reduce traffic and will not reduce traffic, then will reducing lanes add more congestion? It won't. The question is, how much of the cut-through traffic in the Boston area, the second worst congested area in the whole country, how much of that is relying on what should be your heart, your center, your social life to get through the Boston area when it could be taking another path? And so I want to start with that. It's not a question, it's a statement. You can have the downtown you want, and your traffic will still suck. Okay? It'll be just as bad. It'll be 27 minutes, okay? It'll be 27 minutes to get from my house to Bentley, and it's either going to go through your center or it's not. And that's your choice, whether you want me, polluting your air and sullying your retail or not. So I just want to lay that out. That's not a question.
All right, excellent. So what? You never know what Jeff's going to say. So I think what we're going to do now is, if people have comments or questions for any of the consultants, come on up. So I know it's a little bit intimidating, but it's fine. So, yeah, we have a customer. And so we'll just, we'll just take them in order.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I'm Deb Snyder. I live at 24 Arsenal. I can see my condo from here. I'm through the square back and forth constantly because I'm retired. This is where I live now. So, okay. Better? Okay. So, my question, it's Ralph? Okay. It kind of actually feeds on what Jeff was just saying. When you were posting the delay times, the 60 seconds, this one, and 120 seconds, is that vehicular traffic or pedestrian?
That's an excellent question. Those are vehicle delays. We had another slide where we talked about pedestrian delays, but we didn't present it in the same level of detail here today because because we didn't. But we have all that information, and we will be using it as part of our work over the next few days and really through the rest of the study. Tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and we've worked with Ralph and team on past projects where we really drilled into improving pedestrian crossing time to make humans and cars equal. Okay, next question. Come on up. And if you're coming from the back, you know how loud you have to speak.
Hi, I'm Jamie Gordon. I am in Watertown Square about 6 days a week. I wanted to ask oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay. When you're doing the analysis of the different businesses in the square, have you considered how many, when you talk about educational facilities, how many daycares, childcare, preschools, and just how many small children there are in the square? There's a ton of them, including the Boys and Girls Club.
I think we can look into, I think that's a really good thing to know. And so I think we'll identify specifically those facilities and even get counts so that we can, in terms of pedestrian safety, be more conscious of that. That's a great comment.
By me if they want to kind of come up and speak, and we could make sure they each get their chance. And second, this room does have some sound challenges. We're right in that spot under those air handling units, so when you ask a question, it does help to be very close to that microphone, so folks in the middle back can hear. So thank you.
I'm Sally Young, and I've lived here for 50 years. I wonder whether you have thought about small retail pop-ups. This is my random thoughts as I listen to the presentation. What control does the city have over large retail chains coming into the square? How do you deal with limiting that? Can you restrict big trucks on Mount Auburn Street except for deliveries? Can you increase the tree canopy in the parking lots even to alleviate heat island effect? And I think one other thing I was thinking about, if you have big development, can you keep them? Is there a way to limit their ability to have cafeterias so they use local eateries? Thank you.
We will look into all of those things. No, they're all great points, and some of them, by the way, could be tackled when we look at the zoning. By the way, they could be built into the zoning regulations. So, and all for tree canopy. By the way, I think that is something that we really want to focus on even early from a design perspective.
Back and forth, I guess. So real quick, my name's Jason Cohen. I live on Common Street. Spent a fair amount of time in the square. I want to make this real quick. There's so many ideas that I think we're going to talk about the next 2 days. A lot of difficult decisions to be made. The one thing I want to tell everyone who hasn't seen it already, the video that Jeff showed in his talk a couple of weeks ago about the town in England that went through the same thing was brilliant. And if you guys haven't watched it, I would highly recommend watching it even maybe before we come back tomorrow morning, because It's on the WCA TV or YouTube, right? Well, you could say it.
It's called Poynton Regenerated. And I didn't show it, but we all agreed to show it. Poynton Regenerated. It's on YouTube.
Really, I think very germane to what we're going to be talking about over the next few days. And in my opinion, they did a fantastic job out of a really kind of poor situation. So do yourselves a favor, look it up.
I guess I should stand over here. Okay, there you go.
Excuse me. Thank you. My name is Dennis Stuff. My name is Dennis Stuff. I've been on Spruce Street for over 75 years. Two quick questions. Have you ever surveyed businesses that went out of business to find out why they went out of business? Other than obviously they didn't make profit. And secondly, John, in the housing, you didn't mention 465 Arsenal Street, which is some of the first low-income Section 8 housing in the east end of Watertown. And for newer people, where is the East End? Well, that's up to debate because in the old days, when I grew up, the school committee decided that. If you went to the East Junior, you lived in the East End. If you went to the West Junior, you lived in the West End. So the line was always changing. Thank you.
So the survey question, the answer is no. We've never surveyed businesses that have gone out of business. Specifically, we have done surveys with existing tenants and businesses to understand kind of what their challenges are, what their needs are. Because their perspective is very different from folks who are visiting the square and shopping. Right? There's different things having to do with policies, signage issues, landlord issues, all that kind of stuff. So we do get into those policies. On the housing, we were showing, mostly new development on the slide, so we didn't get into a lot of detail on specific existing affordable units. Who's next?
Rita Colafella, I live on Cuba Street. All right, Rita Colafella, I live on Cuba Street. So for John, the real estate guy, you had shown a graph of how many units versus pricing, right? So we're running at $4,000 for new units or something like that, right? Did you do the calculation for what number of units are needed to bring us down to a lower equilibrium in terms of pricing? Because we don't know the supply number. No one's done the analysis.
It's a very good question. So there are lots of studies that attempt to do that at sort of metro levels, not just in Boston, but in other places. Unfortunately, I think the number that's needed in Boston is so far beyond what we're even approaching. Hopefully, MBTA communities will put a dent in that, and it'll start to change. But it's an interesting question. I think those numbers are out there, but in the current situation, we're nowhere close. So
This is going very well so far.
May change. Hi, my name is Sue. I've lived in Watertown for about 20. I'm Sue. I've lived in Watertown for about 25 years. I'm really grateful to be involved in this process. I just have a question for Tim. You mentioned, I think, that Watertown Square could benefit from some change in street edge, and I wanted to know a little bit more about what you mean and at what point in the charrette that would be discussed.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're going to tackle early on is maybe some reconfigurations of the intersection that improve pedestrian crossing, improve throughput of cars. The problem now is that I can't even remember how many streets all come to one point. And so is there some redesign that we could turn maybe the intersection to a simple four-way? And so I think we're gonna start with some real viable radical ideas, just for conversation's sake, and kind of rule things out instead of being timid from the get-go. And so those will be looking at traffic throughputs, pedestrian crossings, and tree canopy simultaneously to see if we can do a kind of triple bank shot there. Yeah, I think we have a very ambitious, I don't know how we're going to do this all, but we have different kind of focus sessions having over the next 2 days. And from 10 to 11 tomorrow, there's going to be an intersection. That'll be the first thing that we kind of talk about and tinker with over the next 2 days. So come on by. Okay, so next question. Second floor up right up here. Okay. All of this is open to the public.
So just for a real quick overview of that. So the sessions are shown in blue in sort of a topic area. We'll have that open to the public. You guys can participate. We'll be talking about a particular topic area. So for example, the first one, the intersection, we're going to be talking about how we can make it work for all modes and support the square we want. Urban form, we'll be talking about what should the square look like, building scale, public realm, and more. Strategic sites, we'll be talking about how we design for these key development opportunities around the square. Destination square, we're going to talk about how we design a square where small businesses can thrive. And then MBTA zoning, we're going to talk about how we get to the 1,701 zoned units we need to meet the new law. So each of those, if you want to come in, you can sit in, participate in that conversation. At the same time, we're going to have the design studio. And while you can observe what these guys are going to be working on, sketching up and drawing, really we want to leave them to do that work. You can observe, and we'll be there as staff to help explain what's going on or have conversation with you. But really the public participation is intended for the blue sections. And then both in the evening, tomorrow and Thursday, we'll have a presentation sort of wrap up. Thursday night, we're going to have some food, again, like we did for the kickoff with some local food establishments here in the square, and then have a presentation of some of the design concepts that we've come up with.
Tomorrow night is a drop-in session, so anytime between, what did we put as a time, 6:30 to 8:30? Come in. Our general policy on the Charrettes is when we draw something, we post it, and when we post it, you can come look at it, and you can say, I like this, I hate this, I think this is something good, and we're here to listen and hear what that is. So if you drop in during design studio time and see kind of what we've got in progress, or if you drop in tomorrow night to see what we did over the course of a day, you'll get a chance to see the same work, both either as it's happening or as it's completed. I will just note that the yellow shaded times that are marked as breaks are not open to the public. It's very important to us that the team gets fed in a quiet and keep dignified way, and that Thursday afternoon is spent prepping for the presentation so that Thursday night's presentation is complete. Having done this a couple of times without doing that last day afternoon closing, they really do need that time to make sure that Thursday night's event is complete. So if you're coming in during the day, you've got tomorrow, you've got Thursday morning. If you want to say, hey, I've seen you sketch this 2 different ways, you should try that third way. If we're going to have time to do that, we need that Thursday afternoon time to actually do those sort of things to get everything ready to show what we can show on Thursday night. So really appreciate it. We'll go back to the Q&A now. I'm sorry for that little delay, and you're up.
Joe Lewandowski, and first a question. Will this deck and any subsequent decks that were shown be made available for download for those people who want to peruse them in greater detail? And yeah, where? City website. Okay. Comment. None of this works without better transit. Period. And we need more frequent, more reliable transit that's well conceived in its physical layout. And that conception has to come from the people who use the service through the city of Watertown. The MBTA always has an idea of what they want to provide, but it's often at odds with what people actually experience. So the people who should be driving changes in transit are those who utilize transit or who would utilize transit if it were better. And believe me, if it were better, more people, many more people would use it.
And Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Watertown Square Improvements.com website that we've been using for this event, as we create presentations, we will put them up there. Okay, it should be up by tomorrow morning. How many people here have a question or comment that they're waiting to say? Okay, I want to make sure you get a chance to, and if you have a moment when you come around to this group, we'll do that. If we start to run out of time, we'll hang out here and answer questions. But right now, so far, we got enough people in line. We should be able to cover this. So please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Thomas Floros, and I am very pro free development. But one interesting thing that came up during our kitchen table conversation that we had was that a lot of other people supported housing and redevelopment as long as it followed certain aesthetic guidelines. And so one thing I wanted to ask was, have you guys thought about making pre-approved housing and building designs similar to what's happened in South Bend, Indiana, where you could have by right development for property owners to be able to build on their property, you know, triplexes, brownstones, 5/1s with first floor retail, so without having to go through so many regulatory meetings and, you know, costly delays.
Yeah, the short answer is that the MBTA community's housing law requires us to work with you to come up with what's called an as-of-right zoning overlay for part of the square. And I think we're going to build in some of those what are called form-based rules into the zoning so that everybody's comfortable that the as-of-right projects that are produced as a result of that zoning meet certain design parameters. So we're absolutely going to be focusing on that when we get to that phase of the project. But not off-the-shelf plans, but guidelines that set maybe the maximum building footprint, maybe the numbers of stories, roof form issues. We have some experience as a consultant doing that in other communities, so we're looking forward to that.
I just wanted to note that, from my perspective, one of the things that won this team their opportunity to do this is their work on doing this particular issue. So MBTA communities, the rule that the state has said, we have to allow a certain number of as-of-right units, does allow us to do a variety of things, including a site design plan review, as well as specifying what I refer to as building form, not necessarily building design or style. It's tough to regulate our architectural style. It is possible to regulate certain elements like ways windows work and roof height situations and such that can ensure that buildings are good neighbors as part of development if or when development occurs under that by right development. And I think that so South Bend has an award-winning form-based code. Hartford and Buffalo are two others that do. Some of the work that UTIL has done is similar in many ways. I worked on a code of that type in Somerville, but we didn't have quite the number of by right units at the end because they added a lot more special permits. But at the end of the day, MBTA Communities is telling us to make these by right. What I really like is that if we are going to say, okay, we're going to make this easier to build, we want to make sure that it's something that's consistent with our community's values. The value of the charrette is to try to understand what that means, what that is, and let these folks write it into a code that we can bring to the city council and that can work in order to do that. So that's part of the challenge of the next 2 days and the meetings that follow and the weeks that follow to say that, we want to make sure that we can get this right. We have folks who can do design tests and draw, and we also have folks that can study the economic feasibility of what we're doing to make sure that we have, where we want something to happen, that it can happen, and that's all part of the strategy we hope to engage. So thanks for the comment there.
Hi, my name's Barney Geller. I've lived in Watertown 40 years, and I've probably gone to dozens and dozens of development meetings, and they all felt like horse and pony. I'm coming from a more cynical place where I got the new development that is now on North Beacon and Irving Street. That's my neighborhood, and I got 200 people to come to a meeting. and we actually ended up with something that's attractive. So I really wanted to follow up on what that gentleman said before me, is that before COVID, I worked in Lexington. You walk down the street in Lexington, it looks like a colonial town. Watertown has lost any sort of sense of attractiveness. I've talked to 1 million developers who are putting up things that look like they're made by Lego. And I say, why are you doing that? And they're saying people like having a lot of different visual differences. I don't think that's in keeping with the style of Watertown. It's been really frustrating process. Even if you look at Arsenal Yards, we had meeting after meeting after meeting, lots of concessions, and then as soon as they got in there, they did whatever they wanted to do.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Olivia Gillum. I've lived in Watertown about 10 years and just got a house on Church Street in 2020. My feedback's mostly for, I think, Ralph and Aaron, the transit experts. That map you showed of how far you can get in 3 minutes for transit, that is not realistic. I'm a young, fit person, and I could not get from Watertown Yard to the Galen Street bus stop in 3 minutes, ever. So my overall feedback on that is that you need to plan for the worst case scenario, and that a lot of our pedestrian and transit infrastructure, I use transit or cycling or walking as my main means to get around, a lot of that infrastructure is worse in practice than it looks from the numbers for whatever reason of visibility or accessibility, or the fact that you don't get a pedestrian crossing unless someone is there to push a button, and if you arrive at the wrong point of the cycle, you're waiting for a full traffic light cycle before you get to cross the intersection, if you are physically fit enough to cross on the diagonal in a single light cycle. So just all of these things add together to make it much more laborious in practice to get around as a pedestrian. I would love to see that change, but if you're looking at current utilization, please keep that in mind.
That's really an important point. We should add the pedestrian crossing time to our walk shed, Ralph. Okay, next.
My name is Rhonda Shadid, and I live on Garfield Street. I've been here for 10 years, and my question is, I'm assuming that you're looking at all of the underutilized spaces, the parks by the river. It's beautiful, the Blue Heron and so on. Will DCR allow for not eateries, but like more benches, and maybe something like Soldiers Field, where they, I think, have food trucks. Everything is kept clean. We don't want to see more construction going up there, but we do want reasons to feel that there's something to do. We don't want our nails to be done, or hairdos to be done, or it would be lovely to have like a bakery or a bookstore, or stores that actually grab you to come to Watertown Square, provided that you can actually cross to it, to the buildings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really want to focus on the whole pedestrian open space network and really think about it creatively. So that's going to be a big focus of this. Next.
Jackie Van Leeuwen, I live on White Ave, and I just hadn't heard anything about residential over retail, which is something I think would really liven up our commercial areas and could be styled in a way that was consistent with what people are looking for, and I think it would be a really good way to add housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, don't trip. Yes, seriously. No more tripping after. Anyway. So Jackie's point, which was that she's very interested in the idea of doing residential over retail when you do development in the square. One of the things I'll share, that one of my initial frustrations with what the rulemaking around the MBTA communities rule is, it wouldn't let you count something as a by right housing site if you required first floor retail. There were a number of us here and in Brookline and a couple other communities that were working on MBTA communities that really nudged the state to try to change that rule as they were setting up what counted. So they now say that within a sub-area of your MBTA Communities District, you can require first floor retail. One of the things we want to look at, and one of the things this team can be very good at looking at, is where realistically, retail can be supported by the amount of housing and jobs that are in the district. And in those places, we would say if something redevelops, we want to require first floor retail in those places. If you get too far off a side street or something, you probably don't want to do that, because if you stretch that too far, you often end up with empty storefronts, and that gets very frustrating. So, but we can test how much retail can be supported and make sure that if we say, okay, on this block, we're going to allow MBTA communities to build, 4-story buildings or whatever it might be. This is an important block. This block has to have retail. We can say that those buildings have to have retail facing the street so that we don't lose that. The last thing I wanted to do was zone the square for MBTA communities and get housing and no place to shop, and suddenly it's not a destination anymore. So the state loosened up that rule for us, which I appreciate, and we will keep an eye on those places where housing over retail development makes sense. If there are places where we're saying, okay, we're going to do development, let's make sure that development has first floor retail where it's done.
I'm Libby Shaw, and hello? Hello? Is this good? Closer, closer. How's this? Okay. Libby Shaw, president of Trees for Watertown. I've been in Watertown about 45 years, so I'm a newcomer. And I want to address two distinctly different points. The first being, so many wonderful things were said sort of in the middle part of this presentation about possibilities for and paying a lot of attention to tree canopy as we develop Watertown Square. That's fantastic news. I have to say, though, that there's something that's hugely missing still, and I'm just going to keep up with this like a broken record. I'm taking the next couple of days off from work so that I can just come and bore you guys with this during the charrettes, and that is, when you're designing this space, it's such a tremendous opportunity to work on developing an ecological environment for this city, in the center of this city. It's really important to be thinking not just about developing the hardscape, but developing a really smart biosensitive greenscape at the same time. It's really important. We have this incredible opportunity to be thinking about not just where the trees are going to be going, what kind of trees, what other kinds of plants, how we're going to create an environment that's going to support the urban ecology, support all the critters from the tiniest to, to owls and hawks and rabbits. I mean, basically, we need to be thinking about developing Watertown Square in this regard as well. So when in that first slide that gave lots of wonderful goals, all of which I completely agree with, what was missing was a focus on the ecological environment. And I realize it feels kind of foreign to a lot of urban planners, or maybe like a bit of an afterthought. It shouldn't be. It should be something you're thinking about from day one. I do. Okay, two other things. There is something called SITES, S-I-T-E-S, which is a landscaping standard that's very much like LEED. It's been around since at least 2015. That's when I first heard a webinar about it. And I don't know if anyone involved in this project is aware of SITES, but it would be really nice for that kind of thing to be thought about. The other thing is completely unrelated, and that's the price per square foot for the commercial property in these new buildings. They said that the current price per square foot is $20 to $25, and in these new buildings it's going to be more like $40. That's terrifying, I have to say. What daycare center is going to be able to pay that? What family business is going to be able to pay that? I don't know how you resolve that, but it just doesn't sound like it's going to really support a lot of the things that we think make Watertown, and we'd like to see Watertown continue being Watertown. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll take those all under consideration, and I want to re-emphasize that the tree canopy and the biohabitat strategy is going to be central. So I don't think we'll ever convince you, but we're going to try. Okay, next.
Hi, my name is Nicole Gardner. I just want to build on one thing you said, Libby, with regard to the ecology, which is that I think we all hope and expect that the Watertown Dam will be coming down in the foreseeable future. It's for many important reasons. And so as you're thinking about the ecological piece and all the interaction of the square with the river, I just think it's important for the team to have that in the back of your minds for midterm planning. Thanks.
Good point. Other comments?
Hi, my name is Chris. I've lived in Watertown for 40 years. I heard someone mention using the CVS parking lot as recreation. I was just wondering about that. It seems to me that the parking lot behind CVS is the main municipal parking lot here. And if it were to be used for recreation, then my question would be, where is the municipal parking going to be? So,
Yeah, that wasn't a recommendation that we had. It was just one of the comments through the poll. This is one of your citizens thinks this is a good idea. Okay.
I have the same question as you do.
Yeah. But we accept and consider every comment we get. Okay.
also, I wanted to ask about the stronger street edge. It was a picture of walls next to the street. I think you were speaking, maybe?
Yeah, the idea is what's the right scale of future buildings relative to the width of a street? Because we consider streets public spaces, and a successful street as a public space has active ground floor uses and has a certain scale that's proportional. That was the point of that slide. Getting the proportionality of building height to street width correct. We're going to propose some options to you.
I think the challenge with that drawing is that it just shows those lines. The value of some of the work that UTL does and can do in the next 2 days is they can actually kind of draw different heights in buildings and setbacks, and you can kind of look at them in a little bit more done like format and really say, and this is one of the things I'll highlight for a moment, the work that you've done with the City of Newton on their villages zoning, which is still an ongoing conversation. But one thing that I've seen that's been very valuable is you've shown, like, what does a 2.5-story building look like? What does a 4.5-story building look like? How does that street feel with those different heights and different walls and different setbacks? And the street that you showed it on right now is mainly tire shops and auto body shops, and you have a lot of parking lots facing the street. We're trying to do that bike lane cycle track along the edge of those parking lots. Not a very comfortable place to be walking or bicycling, but if you built a building there, how far back would you want it? How tall would you want it? Would you want retail in that building? That's kind of the things we need to explore over the next couple of days.
Yeah, we're not going to decide without everybody weighing in, by the way. So come and express your opinion at the Charrette.
Well, I'd like to express my opinion right now. As far as, and maybe I'm not completely understanding what you're saying, but my thought is building buildings close to the sidewalk, close to the street. I've seen too much of that going on here in town. And if it's going to be a residential building, I'd just like to ask the planners to think in their heads about what I want to live there. Because personally, I don't.
All right, thank you so much. We have more people. The line's getting very soft back here. It's hard to know. People are shy. Don't be shy. Oh, yeah, go for it then.
Hello, I'm Anita, and I live on Mount Auburn Street. You can hear me, right? You can't hear me, Steve Owens? I heard comments from a number of people that we've got businesses that are not good for a downtown. Lots of tire shops, auto shops, too many nail salons, too many, what's it called, eyebrow threading, and not enough bookstores, ice cream shops, and so forth. But what kind of influence can this process have on existing businesses? Any?
I think we can represent through this plan what the city would like there, and it would finally come down to the building owners or the owners of future buildings, if there's new development, to curate what's on the ground floor. And we're finding in a lot of places that we work, developers aren't choosing the retailers that can pay the highest rent, which tends to be, at least until 4 years ago, big box. But getting that variety of retail there helps attract people to the condos or the apartments above. And so we're finding that developers are much more sophisticated about wanting to meet the community's interest for retail in mixed-use projects than retail-only buildings. One of the advantages of housing over retail is that the rents or the prices above really drive the financial pro forma, and the retail is actually presented as part of the kind of lifestyle idea of the project. So I think with new development, you're going to see less kind of highest rent retail coming into the square. That's a long, we'll explain this more during the charrette, but I think that, Jeff, do you want to say a few things about this?
Not about that. I'll just make more trouble, and then you can finish up. It's weird. I don't want feedback. So the thing that we should avoid if we're not going to have buildings up to the sidewalk would be this, right? We don't want to see any more of that, right? Just checking, because what Tim said earlier, you accidentally misspoke. You pointed to the slide and you said we used to have a smaller scale of development along Main Street, and what he meant was the footprints of the individual buildings were smaller, right? But actually, if you look at Main Street now in this spot, those buildings are 15 feet tall. These buildings are 45 feet tall. So historically, you've had 45-foot tall buildings right up against the sidewalk edge. So if you don't want that, you don't want historical Watertown Square.
Is that it? Seriously? One more? We're good? You already spoke. Oh, we have a final, no, we have somebody else.
I love the character of those buildings. Absolutely love it. I think that'd be fabulous to have something like that in Watertown. But if they're going to be residential, I would, if it's going to be a residential building, can it please be set back a ways? If it's not entirely residential, there's a question there. Those are probably, half of those are probably residential above the shop. They probably are. Right. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. All right, do you want to wrap up briefly, George or Steve?
Yeah, so just a couple things. Again, thank you all, and those of you who have hung out to the bitter end. Appreciate you all coming. We will do better, I promise, on Thursday night with the sound, and chairs, both, yes. When we did our sound check, it worked fine, but that heating unit wasn't on, and unfortunately, we can't turn it off. I tried. But anyway, so we will hope you all can come to the next 2 days. I think it's going to be a very exciting conversation. At the very least, if you can't do that, make sure you come Thursday night and hear what the results are and what we've come up with. And I think it'll be a very exciting result, and look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you for coming.